Hi, how are you? Thank you.
Just a moment, we'll be ready to go.
They're all fun. Good positive outcome.
Okay, we're all set.
They would agree.
Thanks, Rob. I will go ahead and call this meeting of the Salem Parks and Recreation Advisory Board to order. This is our June 2025 meeting. Thanks everyone for being here. We will, I'm Keith Norris. I'm the chair of the advisory board, and we will start off with a roll call. Rick Hartwig.
Here.
Rick's our vice chair. Alan Alexander.
I'm on Zoom.
Mauricio Flores.
Here.
Zachary Hammerly. Don't see Zachary on Zoom. Al Holland.
I'm here.
Debbie Miller.
Here.
And Sigrid Olson.
And I'm here and I'm eating crow because I said I didn't think it would pass. I want everyone to know I'm eating crow right up front. I actually left with our staff meeting and I said, I'm going to the parks meeting and I've got to eat crow. So I'm sorry. I'm so delighted it passed, but I'm here.
It's a good tasting crow these days, right?
Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks, Sigrid. Well, we do have a quorum for the meeting. Thank you all for being here. We will start off with approval of the minutes from our April 10th meeting. I was absent from that meeting, so I will look to others to lead the discussion.
I make a motion that we accept the minutes as presented.
Second.
Motion by Alan, second by Rick. Any discussion on that motion? All those in favor of approving the April 2025 minutes, please signify by saying aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Those say nay. All right, the minutes pass for the April 10th meeting, and as a reminder, we had canceled our May 2025 meeting. Public comment. Do we have anybody from the public in the room who would like to provide comment on any non-agenda items?
There's no members of the public here.
No members of the public. Thank you, Rob. All right, well, we will jump right in then to our board presentations. We'll start off with a presentation from Alan about low carbon concrete and capital projects. And so this is the final of 3 presentations from our research committees that were started up a little over a year ago that were looking at very particular components. So we had some presentations on in prior meetings. And so Alan's going to deliver our final committee presentation here, and then we will be discussing those recommendations from those 3 committees as our next board item. But Alan, I will go ahead and turn it over to you to provide some of your findings and insights. And if you can kind of remind the board what it was that you were looking into, what your committee's charge was.
I was tasked with looking at low carbon concrete, which I readily admit knew nothing about. I basically did a literary search, read some professional journals, looked at some engineering articles, and tried to glean 10 minutes worth of, or within 10 minutes, some of the information we came up with. And also at the last, I'll share a discussion I've had with city staff on the subject. Low carbon concrete was a new one to me. Being my days in airports, I'm very familiar with cement and concrete and pavement and a bunch of things like that. But I really wasn't really aware of the low carbon. But basically, why in the world would we care about low carbon concrete? Well, concrete is much more injected into our lives every day than we realize. In fact, the statistics show that it's the most used man-made material in the world. We consume 3 tons of concrete annually for every person in the world. That's a lot of concrete. Uh, Worldwide demand for concrete is second only to water. That's how significant it is. Concrete basically is made, concrete's made predominantly with cement. Of course, cement is just a binder and the element that adds strength. But what makes it such a heavy carbon, normal concrete, what such a heavy carbon producer is that limestone's got to be heated in kilns between 2,300 and 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. It consumes a tremendous amount of energy. Historically, that's been done with coal or natural gas, and it consumes a large amount of energy in releasing a significant large amount of carbon dioxide. For example, 1 ton of Portland cement produces roughly 1 ton of CO2 emissions. Cement manufacturing accounts for 7% of all global carbon emissions. Concrete is responsible for 50 to 85% of embedded carbon in any building project. And if it were a country, the concrete industry would be the third largest emitter of CO2 behind China and the United States. So anyway, I found that both sobering and gave a lot of explanation of what and why it can be important. But basically, what is low carbon concrete? That's basically is concrete produced with a lower carbon footprint than traditional concrete. And predominantly that's done to keep it simple, in 3 possible ways. To lower the carbon concrete producers, they can implement a relative low impact changes. For example, switching fuel sources, replacing some cement contents with mineral compounds like calcified clay, and proven technologies like things such as carbon cure. And I'll talk just briefly about those 3. Obviously, the low-hanging fruit is the energy source. Now, cement is produced in specialized plants or kilns, usually far upstream of the end product that we wind up in our city would use in parks and other development. But most of that to get the energy necessary to heat the raw the limestone elements. As I said, you typically use powderized coal and gas, all of which we're eliminating coal is a possibility, and gas is certainly being changed. It'd be an easy endeavor just to say, well, we'll change our energy source as we're producing our cement, which in turn will lower the carbon content of our concrete. Well, unfortunately, the source of energy, a lot of times manufacturers, and I say manufacturers because I said they're specialized plants that produce cement, and they're very large and they're huge energy producers. Quite often they're far upstream on the supply chain. So locally, if we say we want to lower it by changing our fuel source, that just may not be practical. That's up to other companies and other jurisdictions. And we may actually have done that to some degree already, because so much of our energy is coming from hydroelectric, which qualifies for low carbon. So some of it may be built in. Of course, that's mixed with other energy sources. So, and quite often we may not, under the current regime, may not know exactly the mix of where that carbon is coming from in the production of cement. The second one we talked about is low carbon blended cements. Traditionally, concrete's got cement in it. It's got aggregates, and it's got other products added to make it perform to a certain specification and elasticity. But the most energy consuming element is a cement itself. And so by looking at reducing the amount of cement and providing other products, you can actually lower your you can actually lower the carbon in the cement mix from 30 to 40%. But that depends on the availability. Some of the things that have been used in the past are fly ash and slag. Both of those are production of those are declining as environmental concerns, by eliminating coal, we have less fly ash available, and slag is being processed differently in the steel manufacturing. So while those are readily available, there are other chemicals that may be used, but it depends a lot on the specifications and the requirements. The amount of cement included in concrete determines the relative strength, and it can range from a few hundred pounds per square inch up to tons per square inch, depending on the use of the concrete. So that's one possibility, and that's a tremendous amount of research is being done with that, using some other compounds. The third is carbon capture, which is the latest in a series of technology. And by latest, I mean something that's been really researched in the last 10 to 15 years and starting to be applied in others. And basically, when cement is produced, or the carbon from cement production is produced, it's captured and stored traditionally underground. And then at the appropriate time, it's either used for other products or it's injected back into concrete to strengthen it. Sounds pretty bizarre to me, but in reading on in some of the articles, it's really pretty fascinating. But again, that's not done at the local level. That has to be done in the mixing plant or with equipment on the truck itself, injected at the last minute. Once that CO2 is injected into the concrete, then it mineralizes and actually becomes a permanent part of the concrete, and therefore not released into the environment. Obviously, you can see there's some technology involved in that, and also some other things that have to happen. So that's pretty much it. Those are basically a quick outline of three ways it's possibly done in industry now. There's more and more of it done every day. More jurisdictions are requiring it to be considered as a part of the specification development. And once again, it depends on where you acquire your energy, where you acquire your cement, how it's produced, and what other minerals and material we have to mix with that to remove some of the cement content and therefore reduce some of the carbon. I spent a fair amount of conversation with the city's material specification manager, with the city. And to the best of his knowledge, the city is not specifying low carbon concrete in any of their products or any of their projects, primarily because the uncertainty of availability from suppliers, because it's a lot depends on what's happening upstream. There may be some of our concrete maybe have lower carbon than standard because it's already incorporated in the energy we use in making the cement. But once again, that's quite a bit upstream. Secondly, the one example that our city materials manager talked about was part of the new building you're in right now. They tried a batch of it. The company that was the supplier on the bid couldn't perform a certain segment of it at the time, so they went to a secondary provider who provided some low carbon concrete, and they poured one of the patios. It wasn't a large area, but the downside is to it that no good deed goes unpunished. The low carbon failed to meet the strength specifications required in the specifications. It had to be removed and repoured. Not a good end to trying something new for a change. There's a lot more into it, a lot more involved with it, particularly when it comes to and we're talking about low carbon concrete, but you also have to look at what they call embodied carbon. And that's how much carbon was produced in producing all the materials for the project and how those are managed. That's much more complicated. It includes extracting and manufacturing materials, transportation materials to job sites, construction practices, ongoing maintenance, demolition, waste transport, and recycling. So basically the whole life cycle of how much carbon was installed into the product. And then of course, from an operational side, how much carbon is being generated in operating that building or that particular feature, be it a water treatment plant or something like that. That's a much more, that requires a lot more engineering than I can put into it. But it's something that should be considered. Uh, I'm running on out of my 10 minutes. I do have one recommendation and talking to, and I'll give you the name of my resource from the city is Dan Whitehurst. And he's our material specification manager. Very knowledgeable guy, very, very accommodating and very quite open in talking about it. They are not opposed to it. They just have to see it as a practical inclusion into the bidding process without running up the cost and being able to specify and achieve the reliability and deliverability of the product. I said concrete is significant, but not to the point as compared to other projects. I listened to a special the other night on public television about rebuilding LaGuardia Airport, and we talk about significant low carbon and carbon in construction. The rebuilding of LaGuardia required 600,000 tons of concrete, a phenomenal amount. And you know, and just it took a variety of suppliers coming from different directions at the same time to get enough to get that done. We at the city have much smaller projects, still significant. And of course, if we want to meet some of our objectives in our climate action plan, we have to consider every possible source that's realistic. We also have to balance that against reality. And as a result, I had one recommendation, and as soon as I find it, I'll deliver it. As many of you know, I'm the primary caregiver of my wife and her ongoing illnesses. And it's been a hectic day here with hospice nurses, hospice workers, volunteers who come in and of course my home health provider. So I'm been running scattered today, but my one recommendation is that the city monitor and evaluate advances in low carbon concrete and other significant construction materials for possible inclusion in building plans and bidding specifications. It's just that simple. It gives them flexibility to when they see a practical solution to lowering our carbon, that they include that in both the planning and construction bidding. Any questions about low carbon? I can give you lots of sources.
Alan, thank you very much. That was great. Really appreciate the research and the work there that you put into that and providing that overview. Questions and discussions on Alan's presentation. Debbie.
Yeah, I just wondered what the downsides to the sequestered carbon injection are. Does it make it weaker? Is that what happens, or?
Well, the carbon is collected wherever the cement is produced, and because of the size and scope of these plants, they're scattered throughout the country. I don't even know where the closest one. I'm sure there's probably one in Oregon. I don't know where it is. They're large, and they're huge energy consumers. But if you're going to do carbon capture, and carbon capture is a trade name, but it's the same concept for other techniques, requires that carbon be captured during that kiln process and stored normally underground. Well, that's a lot of technology to store a tremendous amount of CO2 underground or store it somewhere. Then it has to be transported to be injected into the concrete. So it has to follow the logistical trail from manufacture of concrete to the production of manufacture of cement, the component that goes into concrete. And it has to follow that supply chain all the way right down to the concrete provider or company. And it's either injected at the mix plant, which we do have obviously some in Salem, or it's injected into the truck. Once again, more technology, more management, and also has to be injected at the appropriate portions. You know, just increases the technology required to get it done. Now, the end product is the CO2 goes into the concrete and stays there as long as the concrete's intact. So the only, you know, and as I said, with advances in technology, it more than likely will become less onerous to do. But you still have to collect the CO2 at one location, transport it, and of course then inject it. Any other questions? The easiest one is, of course, is the fuel source. Conceivably, and because I'm in South Carolina tonight, I checked with some folks here in the State Department of Transportation. They already have that because 60% of the energy being produced in South Carolina is nuclear. So the primary plant in the state that produces the cement is all powered by nuclear energy. So they already claim a reduction carbon. That's not the case in Oregon. While we do have some you know, sustainable energy, and as well, of course, our hydroelectric being the greatest, we still have a mixture of other energy, particularly gas generators.
Great, thank you. Any other questions for Alan on this topic?
Is he still awake?
He is. He's snacking away. But he was intrigued throughout the process. Very interesting.
Enjoy that age. It's a fabulous age.
Good. All right. Well, thank you, Alan. That was great overview. I hope you enjoyed learning all of that about concrete. I suspect you never knew there was so much to know about concrete.
Well, working around airports, I certainly not from an engineering standpoint, but just a need to know basis. I learned a lot about cement and asphalt and concrete and pavement and elasticity and some things like that. But this far exceeds that. It's a fascinating opportunity, yeah, but also has to be practical.
Excellent. Well, if no other questions or comments on Alan's presentation or his recommendation, we'll move on to the next portion of our agenda. And the next item on our agenda is playing peekaboo with its napkin now. Is to discuss the various recommendations that we have heard from these committees. And so our goal here with this presentation, well, I guess I'll back up, right, and say, okay, we established these research committees, like I said, a little over a year ago. There were 3 research committees that were all looking at helping, finding ways where we could provide recommendations. Where we could provide recommendations to the city and help the city achieve its emission reduction goals as part of the climate action plan. Those goals that the city adopted in October of 2020 are that by 2035, Salem's greenhouse gas emissions would be reduced to 50% of the citywide greenhouse gas emissions from 2016, and that by 2050, Salem is carbon neutral. And so many of those things that Alan just talked about related to concrete are directly related to that. So we had 3 committees that were set up to explore some of those options that the city could have related to its parks and recreation work that could help achieve those goals. The first one was Alan's committee here, was looking at material used in capital projects and specifically low carbon concrete. Second committee was led by Debbie, looking at the use of electric equipment in the city, electric and battery powered equipment related to our parks operations. And then the third one, Dylan led that committee and presented a couple of months ago about transportation and looking at bikes and parking designs and alternative transportation options, bike parking, excuse me, and bike sharing related to our parks. So those were our three committees that we've heard presentations from. And what we would like to do now is have a discussion among the board here to say, okay, what were kind of the key takeaways from those discussions? What has stuck with you? What has seemed like some big picture or some big topics that we could really grab hold of and develop into specific recommendations that the board could provide to city council. So we're not necessarily looking to come up with those particular recommendations right now. Our thinking here is we'll look at kind of those high level findings and that these committees have brought to us. From this discussion, then I'll work with Rob and Jen and Rick before our next month's meeting and bring back kind of a slate of recommendations that we can then approve or discuss further and then approve to send to city council. Does that seem like a good path forward at this particular point? All right. Well, then with that, I will open it up for discussion on kind of what have you heard in these committees and what's kind of stuck with you as some of the key elements, and recommendations from these committees.
Chair Norris, would it be helpful if I pulled up the slide decks from the other two groups and just quickly just showed the recommendations to refresh everyone?
Yeah, if you've got that, Rob, I'm open to that for sure.
Okay, great. So the focus on the transportation and parks, I'm just going to go quickly through the recommendations there, but generally they're in three categories. One is budget and planning, outreach and media, and city planning. So I'm just going to looking at those. For budget planning, the recommendations was that EV ready wiring should be built into parking lot costs and upgrades. So just should be a component of our projects when we develop parking lots and parks. We should install charging stations at high use parks like Wallace. And the city should align budgets between parks and sidewalks or crossing funding with plans to prioritize access to parks where improvements are being made, including upgrades to the current weighting system. I believe that's a reference to how we score projects in our capital improvement program. I will say I'm going to plug in, this would be helpful for me as my lived last year of project work, that this would be helpful. We're making improvements to parks. It'd be great if we could make access improvements at the same time so people can use those improvements. In the category of outreach and media, was to work with Travel Salem or a related partner to create a walk, bike, bus, and parks map for Salem, like a brochure. Add a standardized, where can I get from here signboard at key points of interest in parks. Like if you're at Riverfront Park, is something to tell you, like if you took a bike, where could you get to and how far it is. Website information to show alternative transportation options to parks. Review bike fix-it station options, including directing people to nearby bike shops in town. Again, that might be signage in parks. And then the city planning section, it was bike parking should be more prominent in future park development plans. City code should be updated to require space for more bike parking relevant to car parking. Right now it's a ratio. We have to provide a certain amount of bike parking per amount of vehicular parking. The city should emphasize a pathway to parks program where local businesses and areas of interest direct people to nearby parks. The city should revisit a park and ride setup in West Salem near Wallace that includes bike and walking options. Bike parking should be located near bus stops to help users combine alternative transportation options. Park staff should closely monitor the bike share micro mobility conversations underway with Chariots. And then I'll just switch over to the recommendations from the group Debbie led, Member Miller. Yeah, there are 2 recommendations, is that correct?
Well, it depends. I mean, looking at the outsourced landscaping work, you consider that another recommendation? Yeah.
Okay, but the main one here is that park staff in charge of purchasing should be directed to procure battery electric tools for replacements when a suitable battery electric tool is identified with equivalent operational capacity and within cost premise. These should be prioritized over gas powered lawn equipment. So something to that
Yeah,
effect. That's the primary recommendation.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I could definitely pull these materials back up, but I thought I'd just to see what those recommendations were from those earlier discussions.
I appreciate that, that refresher. Okay, board, what are folks thinking? How would we like to, well, I guess what are your thoughts on those recommendations, on kind of the, what struck you during those discussions, from these committees? Some of those high level things that, should come up here. Alan, you started sharing your screen. I don't know if you meant to do that or not.
Yeah, well, since I did, and I tried to include that single recommendation I had so people could see it in print.
We're not seeing that, but your recommendation, I jotted it down, or at least most of it, was to monitor and evaluate advances in the production of low carbon concrete and assess when it might be feasible or practical for the city to include it in their projects.
I also
rough summary.
brought it and after low carbon concrete and other significant construction materials for possible inclusion in building plans and bidding specifications. As I gave you that little tidbit about it in embodied carbon, the concrete along with other significant building materials is a tremendous amount of the carbon that goes in any project.
Any thoughts from the group about how the kind of packages up, Rick?
Yeah, when we evaluate the goals that the city has set, I think it might be important to find out what is the largest cause of CO emissions in Salem, and I believe it's transportation, isn't it? Okay, so the most significant change we can make in that problem is to address transportation. Now that you have to do that in conjunction maybe with chariots and form I think you already have. I used to be on the committee for chariots and when they were starting that process. But I think it's, you know, go for the biggest villain, you know, first, and that's going to make the biggest impact.
I think you can do multiple things at the same time.
Yeah.
I think taking pieces of different things all can do a part of it. So if you just go for the biggest thing, it's also probably one of the hardest things to change is people driving to work, driving to school, people needing transportation, but also looking at pieces of it as they can fit together, like the concrete thing. That could be a huge impact. It's just not practical right now. It sounds like we don't have a lot of control over where we get our concrete from, but to always pay attention to new sources and make sure that people are monitoring that. Sounds like a good.
Don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Right.
Yeah. But, you know, I think you also have to look at the biggest problem.
Yeah, and I think they are looking at the biggest problem, but these are also pieces of other problems that we're looking at.
I'll just throw something out there. You could want to consider efforts that have other side benefits. So think about emissions from small vehicles small motors. There could be health benefits to moving to electric for the employee. And I remember there were some other health-related impacts associated with the research you presented.
Like they call them the co-benefits, so.
Yeah, co-benefits.
They are in the climate action plan, but they're not the goal of reducing just the CO2 emissions, but they're still important, and they're also pieces of better health and better environment, and, you know, it comes together also to improve, you know, decrease your cancer rate, decrease your asthma, your heart disease, also your employees, less injuries, less sick days, things like that. So yes, it's not a huge impact, the landscaping tools on the overall carbon, but it is a small impact, but it's a larger impact on health and on quality of life, and also equity for people who are working in landscaping, and maybe people aren't looking out for what they're breathing and their hearing loss and things like that. So I think there's a lot of co-benefits, even though it may not be the biggest impact on climate change.
Okay, other thoughts or kind of points that you want to emphasize from prior discussions?
I think Dylan had a lot of points, and it's hard to remember all of them without seeing them in front of me, but I think the travel.
Dylan's good at a lot of points.
Yes, I think the travel Salem idea is a nice one, because there are a lot of people visiting Salem now with the Ironman and some of the other events going on, and I think it'd be nice if they had access to alternative transportation. And there's just, and also I ride my bike around. There's not enough bike parking. It's hard to find. You go to a store or something, you have to go down the block, and you don't want to leave your bike way over there. So I think thinking about bike parking, and also putting the infrastructure in when you're building something is going to save a lot of money retrofitting it at the end. So I think those are the ones that I remember that sound like good thoughts.
I have a comment to consider. Maybe this is for this board to consider, but because of the three topics are revolved around minimizing the production or output of carbon. But is there any consideration of capturing carbon within what we could, what can we recommend as far as natural remedies or plans for the city, as far as reforestation and all of that kind of those kinds of recommendations, I think, are the other side to carbon, fighting this carbon issue. But those three topics that we discussed are all just minimizing the production of, which is good. But there's another element that can help this effort. So I don't know, just maybe it's a little too late because there's no projects that were revolved around that. But I think still long term might be something for the board to consider.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Mauricio, right? So if you think about carbon neutrality goal of the city, that certainly is part of that. I believe the city's goal specifically has an emissions reduction target, which I'm not sure how the city categorizes that within. Can they achieve emissions reduction just by capturing all of it? I don't know how they're interpreting that wordage. Based on the document I have in front of me, it says specifically emissions, and then but by 2050 is carbon neutral. Carbon neutrality to me does incorporate the idea of carbon capture elements in there. So I like your thought and your idea though about, and I don't necessarily think it's too late, right? So if I'm envisioning what our recommendations look like here, it's in the form of a letter to city council. And that letter says, hey, we had these research projects that looked into these various components. Here are our recommendations for for ways that you could move this forward in relation to achieving the city's climate action plan goals. And I think we can detail out then a few of these high level recommendations from these various committees. And I think we can conclude that by saying, also, we want to make sure you recognize that carbon capture components are a part of this, and you plant more trees and that's gonna be helpful to achieving the goal, right? And that can be counted toward the goal. If I remember things from the climate action plan and how it's structured, there's a lot of various strategies within it. And I think some of those strategies were around tree plantings and canopy cover. I see Councilor Varney nodding, so I'm interpreting that to be, I'm remembering that correctly. I couldn't remember if that was part of this plan or a separate tree canopy plan, but there are certainly city goals around that. And so I think we could certainly bring that forward as part of our recommendations, or emphasize the overlap in that, in terms of a number of goals the city has that are related to those sort of components, Mauricio. So I think that's a good thought.
Yeah.
Other thoughts, other ideas for or things that struck you as you were hearing these committee presentations that you want to think we could emphasize?
Can we see his conclusions again? I don't remember all.
This is the group being referred to as city planning, but there's the budget and one's more like marketing, so I can move to any page you want.
What is the current space for bike parking relative to car parking? You said there was already a ratio. It must be pretty low. There's not a lot of bike parking.
I could pull it up if you wanted me to. It'd take me just maybe 15 seconds. I could.
Feelings not with the city.
It's relatively low. I don't remember what it is
Yeah.
either. I believe we
You can't find a
discussed
place to
it.
park your bike.
I think it came up for us in discussion of the gear park master plan update related to the skate park that's going in right now. I think is where we kind of touched on that component. So if Rob has it, that would be helpful.
Just give me a minute. I'll find it. I'm pretty fast at these things. Reshare my screen so you can see what I'm looking at. Okay. Amount of off-street, wait. Amount of off-street loading. Wait, I'm in the wrong spot here. I thought it was in bike parking.
Mount.
There we go, there we go. The minimum required biking, also minimum biking shall be, okay, so park development will be under parks and open space. This would be a public park would be the greater of 4 spaces for every 1 space of normal vehicle parking. So 1 space per 30, so it's either the greater of 2 options. So it's either a minimum of 4 spaces, so no matter what, we have to have 2 bike racks in a park, or we have to have 1 space for every 35 vehicular parking spaces.
I guess I was also thinking
30.
about,
Sorry, 30.
I was also thinking about in the streets, when you go to like, you want to go to a store or something like that, can't find parking place. Yeah, and like you go to Ross, you can hardly find a parking place to park your bike, or I mean, you can at some of the grocery stores, but not all. I know this is parks, but we're also making a recommendation to the city.
So am I hearing that maybe we should think about a broader recommendation, specifically, this table to kind of, because this table does identify all land uses in the city and then has a standard for it. So this is table 806.9. So maybe we could specifically call some attention to maybe the planning commission review this or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
To add
Because
designations for parks.
Yeah, see, I'm confused because sometimes we're talking about recommendations for park and sometimes we're talking about the whole city. So I guess I don't know about parks. I mean, I don't know if there's enough parking. There seems to be enough park. I usually don't park my bike at the park. I usually ride it at the park, so I don't stop and go on the playground or something. So I'm not sure how much parking there is at the park, and that seems like an adequate amount, at least that many. I don't see them all being used. But I was thinking of just when you're trying to go to a store or something, you can't find a place to leave your bike and safe.
So I think for my 2 cents on that in terms of our role as the board is our scope is parks and recreation. And so I think we would word a recommendation around that that's be specific to the parks and recreation facilities. But I think we could add a clause on the end of that that suggests there are other components within this concept of bike parking that are we would encourage other elements of the city to look at as well. So I don't think we should be in the business of making specific recommendations of around that, since that's a bit outside of our scope, but I think we could call attention to it related to it all. And just identify those recommendations as kind of outside our particular purview. But I think it's also all related, right? When you think about bikes, if you want people to transport around the city in bikes to reduce carbon, right? And that just kind of gets at your comment of changing people's behaviors. You got to make it as easy for them to do, and they got to be able to go from one spot to the other, and bikes be able to work for the whole thing if you want to transport around the whole city in bikes, right? So from stores to parks to wherever. So it's all interrelated.
When I think about coming here, my first thought is my bike gonna be safe? I'm not gonna go here if I don't have, and I know that that's where I parked is a safe spot, but there's a lot of places I think about going and there's nowhere to park my bike other than on a fence or, around a post or something.
If I recall Dylan's specific comment around bike parking in parks, it was the idea that particularly families or kids that are maybe out in a group together riding their bikes, if they're going to the park, they're coming as a group. And so not just four bikes at a particular park might be limiting to the idea of a whole family of 5 or 6 people or a whole group being able to come. I think is what his driving was around that. So the driving thought around that, if I remember that presentation correctly. But Al, sorry, I think I cut you off there in the room.
Since we're talking about climate issues on this, I was curious if anybody can find out why or we don't have rentals anymore. A couple of years ago, there was a bike rental company that operated bike rentals here in town for a while. There was a station by Wallace Marine Park across from the courthouse that rented bikes, and I don't remember where the other locations were around town, but they disappeared. They probably unsuccessful business for some reason. I'm wondering if that kind of business might be encouraged more by the city in some way. I know that Portland's had some of those and they've had some issues with them, but traveling around Europe, they are rampant. There are all over. So I'm wondering what we can do to encourage that, whether it be between and to and from parks or otherwise. But I think the electric bike rental companies should be encouraged to operate here.
Yeah, and I can attest to the bike rentals in Europe, because I just came back a couple of weeks ago from Prague, Linz, Reims, Vienna, Bratislava, and Budapest. Every single one of those cities had, on many of the corners, had bikes that you could just come up and, I don't know, use your credit card and you got a bike. I don't know how they work it out, but maybe it'd be a good idea to ask them.
Yeah, the same thing is true in Barcelona, Madrid,
Yeah.
and Lisbon. I saw that in every one of those places.
Yeah. And also the electric scooters too, that were rentable right there.
Can I make a comment relative to some of that, because there was at Wallace Riverfront had them for a while as well. So some of the feedback we received, so they weren't around real long, to be honest. some of the feedback, I'm not saying in totality, but that we heard from that particular company at the time and so forth is folks were taking bikes, not necessarily bringing them back in appropriate condition. We found them everything from in the river, folks were throwing them in the river to other places, they were being vandalized, they were being things. So it became a costly endeavor for them because they were having to kind of go around, pick them up. You know, they weren't necessarily returning them where they needed to be returned. And so it wasn't financially profitable for them. Also, there wasn't the response level for people utilizing. I appreciate what you're saying with regard to Europe, but I think some folks around here weren't as familiar with that kind of program. And so the response level was not as they had anticipated that it might be. So kind of the negative issues were outweighing the resources that they were investing in it. So, you know, that was a particular snapshot in time, you know, in a particular company. So, you know, I'm not making a blanket statement about that, but that was just some of the feedback that, you know, that we heard at the time. So.
Yeah, and I don't know how they do it in Europe, but I would imagine it's something like you use some type of a credit card. And then when you return it, you use the credit card, and if you don't return it, they charge you for the whole vehicle.
Yeah.
I think there's must be some way that they're doing it, because otherwise they'd run into the same problem that they ran into.
Yeah, and there's been, I think, kind of a myriad of different programs. There's some programs where it might be like that. I don't know about this particular one back then. There's some that it's kind of free use because they're encouraging folks to use them. So you can just pick it up and then leave it somewhere else and then go on about your way. So, you know, I think there's kind of a spectrum of programs of things like that are available. So, but it's not, like I said, it was kind of a one-off kind of thing. So there certainly hasn't been a lot of interest of folks pursuing that.
Okay, well, to kind of bring this to this particular agenda topic to a close, I think what I'll suggest is that I will work with Rob and Jen and Rick on perhaps a draft letter that we can bring to the board for our next meeting, our meeting next month, that summarizes some of the input here and some of the recommendations that we've heard and that.
You just muted yourself. Or
I didn't, but a 12-month hand might have. Just playing keep away with the computer there for a little bit. I don't know where it muted me, but yeah, we'll work with some text. We'll get a letter together because I think that will help us kind of target our discussion to particular recommendations, right? And stop us from kind of just going in circles on a few fronts. So we'll work together on that. Rick, I'm sorry, Rob, if you could send out those presentations or at least the kind of summation of the recommendations made by each of the three committees to Rick and I, that'll help us get started, I think, on that letter. Any other thoughts on approach or things you want to make sure that we take into consideration as we're moving forward on that? All right, excellent. We will then move to our next agenda topic, which is a discussion of our engagement as board members with various neighborhood associations. And so for the past couple of years, we have worked to connect with the neighborhood associations across the city. We typically do this in late summer. And so now is a key time for us to specifically talk about our outreach there and our approach to it. And so I think what I'm going to do is turn it over to Rob to discuss kind of the Rob, in our packets we had a handout and a draft assignment lineup, I believe, correct?
Correct.
Are you prepared for me to turn it over to you for this?
Yes, I can take it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, let's see. I'll start with a little background about what neighborhood associations are here in Salem. So the city has 17 recognized neighborhood associations within the city's limits. Some of the neighborhood associations actually include pockets outside of the city's limits. They are independent entities from the city of Salem, but they have a special role and receive resources from the city. One of their special roles has to do with land use planning, which isn't really directly related to the work of SPRAG, but when there's land use development in a portion of the city, depending on the type of development, the applicant may be required to visit the neighborhood association, and the neighborhood association then has an opportunity to comment on the land use development in their neighborhood. They also do a lot of other things. They help organize volunteer events and community cleanup events in their neighborhood, and they also have many of them focus on helping the city maintain and improve the neighborhood parks that we have in our community. In 2023, SPRAB initiated outreach to neighborhood associations, and as I understand, the main intent of that was really to make sure all the neighborhood associations knew of SPRAB's existence and that the board was there to help them address any issues or concerns they had with the parks in their neighborhood, as well as to really focus on the Salem Park Improvement Fund, which is that grant program the city offers to neighborhood associations, which is an opportunity to make small investments into the neighborhood parks. The first year we did it, members typically were taking a slide deck and presented the slide deck at the meeting. I think that works for some neighborhood association groups, but not all of them, because there's a variety of ways that they meet and conduct their meetings. So in your packet, there's really two items. One is just a preliminary assignment list that's been updated with some initial feedback on who might go to each one. And I do want to just highlight here that the gray boxes mean that we did not make it to that neighborhood association that year. So they may have not seen or have not seen a presentation from a SPRAB member yet, as well as I do think West Salem, we didn't reach them as well. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of the 17 have not received any contact from SPRAB yet. And again, this is just a first pass at assigning members to go and then what I think the assignment would entail would be to contact the chair of the neighborhood association, and that the chair's contact information is all published on the city's website, and their email address, it's all available on the city's website. And then to see if the entity was interested in having you attend their meeting and just speak for a few minutes about what you were there to speak about. And then to help with that latter point, Member Miller asked me to prepare something that was more of a handout for one of her outreach events. And I did, and again, this would need to be updated with more current content, but it just shows you it would just the SPRAB's duties, its mission, its vision. And then we would update the information about when the board meets and its members. And then as part of the annual report SPRAB generates, I would then update kind of some of the highlights so the board get an idea of some of the things SPRAB works on. And then of course, then there is this featured part about the SPIF program that you could then speak to, just make sure they're aware and know that that's an opportunity available to all the neighborhood associations. Chair Norris, does that cover it?
Yeah, I think that covers it, Rob. So thank you for that overview. And as Rob said, this would be kind of our lineup here for what your assignments would be related to the specific neighborhood associations. And the assignment would be to get out there to make that contact, to try to line yourself up to present at one of their upcoming meetings ideally prior to the SPIF deadline. Jen, can you, or Rob, can you remind us when the SPIF deadline is?
So there's a couple phases to it. So we'll send information out in September about the SPIF program starting for the 2025-27 cycle. And so letters of intent will be due by the end of October. And then we'll do an initial blush of those projects to make sure there's no concerns or issues with them. And then we'll reach back out to the neighborhood associations, letting them know that. And then from that point through the end of December, first of January, we'll put estimates together for them on their projects, on, how much it would cost, so that final applications can be submitted if neighborhoods want to pursue that. And then they have until the end of January to submit the final applications, and then we review them in February for the awards.
And so in order to meet that kind of initial, so what I was trying to get at is, ideally, we are having these meetings by early October, right? So they could potentially get that letter of intent in for the SPIF application by end of October. And so that's what the assignment would be. And so the goals being, make sure they know SPRAB is a resource and that they're aware of this opportunity for the Parks Improvement Fund to invest in their local neighborhood parks. So
just
with that, I guess,
sorry, just a couple that, just really quick, sorry, Keith, is that
Yeah.
I do send information out to all the neighborhood chairs, co-chairs, or vice chairs, along with a packet that talks about SPIF, which sends them the timeline and all of that as an initial thing in September. So it's not to replace, obviously, the one-on-one that you folks are having, and that's been a great response to that. But just so that you know, is we do initiate that with, we pull the current list of chairs and co-chairs and send that out so that they're familiar, hey, this is the time it's happening. So put it on their radar, at least.
excellent. So with that, I guess what I'll say is, you see the draft kind of line up here for 2025 there in the first column for each neighborhood association. Does anyone have any particular concerns about any of their assignments that we should discuss? And I guess depending on the nature of the concern, maybe we shouldn't discuss, but would anybody like to suggest changing some of their assignments?
I'm on a board.
Yeah, Debbie, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm on the SWAN board. And so what happens in the summer is that, you have a meeting in June usually, and then in July you go dark. A lot of them don't have a meeting because it's the 4th of July, people being gone, a lot of vacations. And then in August is the National Night Out. And so a lot of people replace their meeting with the National Night Out, a lot of the neighborhoods. And so they don't have meetings in July and August. So then you have to get in September. And a lot of times that's the first time they've met now as an official meeting and they've got a lot of things to talk about because they haven't met for 3 months. So getting on their calendar in September is hard unless you do it really early. Getting on there just to say a few things, like say, here's the timeline, just a reminder, maybe have a little listening session, about parks, just saying, because they ask you questions about the parks and you can't answer them because you don't know. So then you have to bring them back here and then try to get some answers. But just saying it's a listening session, what are your concerns? I'll bring that to the board, might be a good thing. And then also just trying to get on for a quick thing, like just here's your timeline. I'm just here to, if you want to know what the timeline is for SPIF, just to remind you, that might be a good thing, but to try to get in for a talk in September is tough because they've been off for so long. So I think either we need to start earlier or, revise it somehow, so, have a thing in June or something, or May.
Yeah, that's a good note, Debbie.
One thing I noticed was, I only had 2, the last time. And, I noticed that not all neighborhood associations are created equal. One of them, they were so well organized. They even had a person, that was in charge of the parks in their neighborhood association and who knew more about SPIF than I did. And, were educating me. And the other one was, barely holding together as an organization. They were very interested, all 3 of them. And I don't know what's become of them since then, but I still have them, so I will check that. But it's a real. I was a little apprehensive about doing it, but the whole thing. But it was very rewarding for me to go out to these neighborhood associations and listen to them but they're all sorts of, some are extraordinarily organized and some are barely holding on. And, I think we can be a real big asset to all of them.
Great, thank you. Any other thoughts or concerns or things you want to shift about this draft lineup? If not, and I'm not seeing any, I think what we can do is we'll call this final. Rob, we don't need to like vote on this or anything, right? It's purely an internal document.
I don't think that's necessary.
Okay, I think so either. So what we will do is consider this complete and consider this kind of your assignments here. Rob, maybe if you could send this out with the draft removed and maybe the 2023 information removed, so that way folks are clear on what their assignment is, along with the updated handout. Folks can then go from there and contact each of these neighborhood associations and work to get on their agendas. As Debbie pointed out, that could sometimes take a few months if they have full agendas or aren't meeting. And so initiating that contact sooner rather than later is certainly something I learned last time as as beneficial. Does that sound like a good approach here?
Sure.
Okay. Great. With that, then the next item for discussion on our agenda is preparing for the 2025 National Walk to a Park Day observance on October 10th. And so what we are looking for here is general awareness of SPRAB that this is happening. This is something that the city did a couple of years ago with SPRAB's encouragement to kind of help promote parks a few years ago. And so the city is looking for volunteers from SPRAB, for 2 to 3 members that could assist with planning and coordination of this event in October. And obviously everyone could be involved in helping promote the event. Depending on how it plays out, not necessarily everyone can go to the event because then we would have quorum and there would be public meeting rules. But we'll figure that out when we get closer to October. But what we're looking for right now, and Rob, maybe you want to can give a little bit more of an update of where the city is and kind of their planning at this point for the event. But I know we're looking for some SPRAB members to help engage and think about what this event could look like and how to promote it specifically on in social channels.
Thank you, Chair Norris. The city has started to plan for the observing the National Walk to a Park Day in October, and we would like to have some SPRAB members help us with that. We are tentatively planning an in-person event that would be with a local public school in the Salem Kaiser School District, and where students would walk to a local park, likely one of the parks that we're improving this summer, possibly Morningside or Livingston, where we're replacing playground equipment. The actual day, actual national event day is October 10th, which is a Friday. I'm aware that that's a day that students don't have school. So we'll probably actually have the event on the Thursday, and then we'll promote the event on our social media and kind of encourage everyone else to celebrate it that following day. So it's likely going to be Thursday, October 9th and again, we would meet up at a school and then walk with a group of students. And then in terms of your role, we would love to help you kind of plan out kind of like what are the kids going to do when they get there? What are we going to do in terms of the details of the event? What kind of messaging we want to highlight? And then of course, join us. And then something I think that all the members could do, but certainly the ones who'd want to volunteer could help us promote the event on social media, either before the event or particularly after the event. And then, like I said before, encouraging everyone else to celebrate, just take their dog for a walk or take their kid for a walk to the park that next day.
What time would the event be? After school then? Is that?
It's probably gonna be during school, school side.
I'm school that day.
No, so
No,
on Thursday, the
It'll be
ninth,
on
it'd probably be a Thursday night, and it's just tentative, it's all tentative, because we're just starting the planning. But I would imagine it might be like a 1 o'clock event, just kind of toward the end of the school day.
So the kids would leave school and come walk with us? Is that?
And then they'd
Yeah.
come back to school and then they would be done.
Yeah, I think last time it was from Liberty School and were they third graders? And their teachers came with them to Wendy
Wendy Kroger.
Kroger Park, yes. And I live not that far from there, so I brought my dog.
Mhm.
And it was very, very nice. And a lot of those kids said, hey, I didn't even know this park was here. Yeah, so, yeah, it was, the school, obviously the school has to buy into it and let their kids out of a class. And I don't know how many classrooms, probably a couple classrooms of third graders. But it was very successful.
I think it sounds like fun and I'd love to be involved, but what do they do? I mean, like they do chalk drawings or do they have a game that they play or is that kind of what?
Well, that's part of what's yet to be determined. I remember you, Counselor Barney requested that maybe if we did again at Wendy Kroger, maybe we do some environmental education component about the creek and salmon.
Right, since it was there,
Since
right?
it was there, you talked about, maybe inviting the Salem police and they could maybe participate in some way. So that's yet to be determined, but there would be a program. It would depend on kind of what this planning group, so city staff and the board members really want to decide we want to highlight. Obviously, access to parks is one of the main things, but there's one of the other things we want to really highlight at the event.
Yeah,
And that would perhaps be part of the role of this committee that we're looking for a couple of volunteers for, right? To help think through what are those opportunities. This is a National Walk to a Park Day, right? So the idea is it's promoting specifically that parks. I think, trying to remember what organization kind of runs it at the national level, but the stated goal kind of being promoting the idea that everybody should be able to walk to a park within 10 minutes, right? And so highlighting that walkability, the local neighborhood park components of it. So is anyone interested in joining the city staff as a volunteer for this committee work to engage with that? I saw 3 hands there in the middle of the room. Mauricio, I couldn't see if you raised your hand or not because you're off camera, but I'm guessing
No,
not.
I did not.
Okay. You're just off the outside edge there. Excellent. Well, then we'll take Debbie, Al, and Rick. Happy to have Rob. That was the goal of this discussion, right?
Yep. We're good.
Perfect. And so those 3, thank you all for jumping in on that and engaging with the city. I'll leave it to Rob to kind of loop you in on what the city team is working on there and where we could be best plugged in. We will look for updates from the 3 of you then on kind of that effort in future meetings, if not a specific agenda item, at least during the board member kind of update portion of our agenda, just to bring some of those discussions and ideas back to this group. Al.
Question on that is, this apparently seems to be focused on one event, a school going to a park. And I'm wondering if we might consider the possibility of encouraging other schools to do it independently or separately to their nearby neighborhood parks. So it's a broad movement, not just a single focus. Is that part of the idea or is that just something else?
It's a great idea that we certainly discuss. My one thought is that, the city certainly has resources to do one event.
Yeah.
And then we could definitely have promotions to outside of that, encouraging others to participate, whether that's a school or just people in their home. But yeah, I want to be careful about overcommitting city resources.
Okay, yeah, I understand that. I'm just thinking that the notion of promoting going to a park is great. And if we can concentrate and do it real big in one spot as an example, maybe that's great. But the idea of everybody walking to a park for a day from a school, a nearby park is a neat idea. And if the schools could buy into that, that would be wonderful.
There are quite a few schools that have a park
Very close.
as part of almost their campus. And so there's this, I know there's this tug of war as to who's taking care of the park. And is it the school district or is it the parks department? Because they're almost simultaneously together. So, yeah, for some schools, that's no problem. They do it every day.
So Al, I love that line of thinking, right? Of how can we kind of use this as a key event, the city involved kind of primary event, but have what is the way that could be encourage other schools or other businesses or whatever, right? To take a break out of their day and take a walk to the park. So I think that's a great line of discussion for the committee. As Rob said, the city's going to be, I think maybe focuses on specifically being engaged and present at a particular event at the flagship event, if you will. But how could we use that as a model for encouraging broader engagement to the idea of walk to park? I like that line of thinking. So looking forward to seeing what you all come up with in your committee discussions. Next up, we have Councilor Varney here, and we asked Councilor Varney to come and provide an update for us. So thanks for coming, Councilor. Specifically, an update related to Sigrid eating crow, related to the idea that this levy passed, and what does that mean for kind of city budgets and our parks and recreation programs, and to give us some of those insights from City Council. So, Councilor Varney, we've got a few minutes here, and I will turn it over to you to do with what you'd like.
Well, thank you. You pretty much said it. I first of all wanted to say thank you all, for your support letter, and wow, it took a huge village, but I'm just so thankful that the levy passed. For libraries, for Center 50+, and of course our parks, our many parks. It was just devastating to think about what would happen if it didn't pass. So we're all breathing easier. And so the impacts, I think it's pretty much kind of just continuing with what we have right now. There are some additional hours for the library, but in terms of parks, we're trying to get our feet back under us and get going again, like the summer programs. I've heard folks asking about the summer programs, et cetera. And I said, we're getting what we can get going in the movies and everything. So there's just so much excitement. And that was visible by the returns. It was very, very much supported by folks. So thank you. In terms of the budget, on Monday night, we had the public hearing on the budget, et cetera. And then council will be voting on the budget, at our next meeting on the 23rd, I believe. With the levy, I wanted to mention one of the most popular other items having to do with the levy is putting the parks and library and Center 50+ funds into the separate dedicated account. And that to me is that protection where it will no longer be impacted by the things going on with general fund with revenues, and we won't be pitting, top funds or police or something against supporting a park or something. And so that's just really great peace of mind.
What happens after 5 years though?
Well, we need to find funding or a district, develop a district or, this doesn't mean that we don't do anything.
We'll have the answer to that question in about 4.5 years, Rick.
I may or may not survive that long.
Yeah. So I don't have much of anything else to add. Great discussion today. I was thinking on walking to parks, you might want to pull Beth Schmidt into it from Safe Routes to School.
I've been working with Safe Routes to School really closely with the bike club and Beth Schmidt. I was thinking, and asking if I could do that.
Okay. Okay, yeah, I was thinking of that. And then the handout, the neighborhood associations, I mean, I think the handout, updating that as soon as possible is a great idea because it could just be sent to the chairs ahead of time. And that had so much good information in it. I think that's really, really helpful. In terms of Salem's Climate Action Plan, the next meeting of the Climate Action Plan Committee is here on Monday upstairs at 1 o'clock. And Member Miller will be presenting on the electric equipment use. So for those of you that want to attend the meeting, that's when it is. So thank you. Let me see if I have anything else here I wanted to mention. No, just thank you for all you're doing. Let me know how I can help out on projects. I loved all the research projects. I think that is a great idea. And those recommendations, I know the Climate Action Plan Committee will be just really encouraged to hear about that too. I'm just going to mention it at the meeting on Monday.
Great, thank you.
And one quick question, did we lose a lot of ground, like on the, people are asking about the splash pads, are we later than usual? Are we losing ground on the recreational programs because of waiting for the results of the levy?
So splash pads, we typically don't open until after school is out,
Okay.
Anyway, so, which is the 12th this year, today, actually. So, we have to inspect splash pads, same as drinking fountains and all of that, and check the backflows and all those kinds of things. So typically we start that process a little bit earlier. But specifically neighborhood parks would have been impacted with the splash pads. So, but we've made it a priority because we recognize, you know, that was important to the public. So our timeline in doing that was to try to get them open by tomorrow. The splash pads, not all the drinking fountains. We're still doing a lot of testing on drinking fountains and the things are in the parks, but by tomorrow. So the caveat would be is if we happen to have a particular splash pad that in testing it needs a lot of repairs and line work or something, it may take a little bit longer, but it's for that particular pad. But anyway, so now the weather's cooling off. So of course it's appropriate for splash pads to open. So anyway, that's our goal is tomorrow to have those up and running. With regard to the rec programs, specifically the day camps and the sports programs that would have been impacted. So yes, it's very much later than we would have started that process and put that information together. The focus this year was really those outside contracted classes that were going to transpire. So what we've been working on and we're finalizing, and hopefully that'll go out today or tomorrow, and messaging is a condensed recreation guide. So we've been focusing on, it will be a scaled back version of the recreation programs that we offer. But we've been focusing on what ones can we do with the staff that we have, because we have to now recruit staff, which is very late for us to recruit staff. What staff do we have, seasonal staff that we can utilize maybe and borrow from softball, kickball, right? Because they weren't impacted. We're going to do a little bit of a rolling start with some of our programs, which is not typical of how we do that. So we're going to start with implementing in some locations the first week. Our hope is the last week of June to get some day camps and some sport programs, which is super fast, as we go through the programs. And then the next week we would roll in more and do that. And then we would have kind of a rolling stop at the end for those so that we can do them the typical amount of duration. So we're trying to also focus on having activities in all areas of Salem. We want to acknowledge and recognize that the city as a whole helps support the levy. So we want to make sure and focus that we have some offerings. So again, it will be a scaled back version. So it won't be the typical, all the program offerings that we have, but we think, for what we can do in the time frame we had in the kind of late start, pretty robust for us, because it's literally
Wow.
it's literally a person who facilitates those day camps and stuff. So we're trying to give her support, to help move that process along. So we're really excited that we'll be able to do some offerings across the city, but yeah, so as early as the last week in June.
That's fantastic. Yeah, and I'd appreciate getting whatever information as soon as possible so I can get it out on social media myself, so I can.
Yeah,
get
we're
that
happy to, and
communicated.
and we know a lot of folks are you know, have been calling, right?
Sure.
And kind of to do that. And so we're trying to keep folks updated, but we also want to be able, the rep guide is such a handy tool electronically. That'll be the focus, and we have some where folks can pick them up. But that's an easy guide for folks to kind of see what's going to be available. So we've really been focusing, and like I said, we're just about ready to do that. So then folks, like I said, easy reference, but yeah, we're excited, but we'll want to share that information for sure. So
Our work's in progress for turning on drinking fountains wherever possible.
we've started those inspections and doing that at the same time, especially in those parks where there's a splash pad and drinking fountains. Our focus, to be honest, for drinking fountains initially is urban and community parks because of the larger breadth of folks who use those. And then we're rolling into neighborhood parks with regard to drinking fountains. So realistically, we have a lot of drinking fountains, so it will take several weeks to troubleshoot them and get them out. Some, there may not be issues, some there may be issues. So it's an ongoing thing that our staff is, we have a staff of 2 who deal with irrigation, all irrigation throughout the 92 parks. And so, you know, they were redirected because we had a big mainline break that took a couple days for them to fix, but they're diligently out there between more priority kind of issues with regard to breaks and stuff, out there testing and getting things open. But it's a process, right? We have 2 people who are working really hard to make that happen as soon as possible.
Yeah, I had a couple of people ask me about the drinking fountains, so now I can answer the question now.
Yeah. So, but you know, realistically for the whole system, it's gonna take a few weeks.
Thank you. Thanks, Jen. Thanks, Counselor Varney, and thanks for your support for the levy and for the parks kind of throughout this whole effort of getting the levy passed.
The live
appreciate
videos
that.
on Facebook were fun.
Really glad to hear we're able to get those things restarted. And even if we're a little bit delayed, it's certainly a vast improvement on where we would have been. All right. With that, we'll move over to board member updates. Any particular updates from board members on activities they are engaged with related to SPRAB?
I'll make an observation that I've noticed that the insect traps for the emerald ash borer have been replaced in the trees for observation. Apparently, I've heard any reports. I'd be anxious to hear what findings come from the discoveries on those sticky traps. Other than that, I don't have anything more.
I worked with the Arbor Day, and that was really interesting. I love doing that, and been watching the trees and see how they're doing there. A couple of them look kind of like they need more water, especially the red cedars. I've noticed that. I also did the Pioneer Cemetery, worked on that with the Swan Board, and that's really fun. It's a very fun project, cleaning that, and it's kind of zen. It's kind of fun being out there doing that. Been working a lot with the Safe Routes to School. That's not directly related to parks, but there's a lot of alternative transportation, getting kids on bikes, and things like that. So, it's been busy.
Just a quick note about the tree planting at Minto. I know our forestry division has started hand watering trees.
Yeah.
And they did water the trees on Tuesday.
Okay, good.
But I've seen what you've seen. We're gonna
Yeah.
have a couple replacements, yeah.
In reading through the packet and especially the recreation, may want to recheck, there's some typos in there. I think it's supposed to be movies in the park, not moves in the park. And they only did it in the headline, but they also did it in the description. So you just might want to check, especially if that's going out to the public. I've had some moves in the park.
Oh, in the movies in the park, yeah.
That threw me at first too, Rick. I thought maybe we had started a Friday night like dance party or something.
Yeah, sorry about that.
And then I saw it. I saw later it said movies. Now that makes more sense.
I think my best moves are behind me.
Right.
Got it.
All right. If no other board member updates, we will move into the information reports as well. And I wanted to highlight, I think, 2 parts of that specifically the ODOT project was in there and is moving forward that we saw, or that we had a number of presentations and discussions about. I also think since the last meeting, I submitted a letter to City Council, kind of summarizing our discussions about that project and our recommendations related to it. So that is included in the information reports. Rob, I don't know if there was anything more to talk about with that particular one.
Keith, can I just mention that was a great letter? That was a very great
Thank you,
letter.
Rick. Thank you.
I think you did great on that. I do just have a couple other items I'd like to just fill in if that's okay.
Perfect. The other one I wanted to mention was the follow-up you're doing with Willamette University on the ball field.
Great.
But maybe that was one you were going to touch on already. I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, I can start with the Willamette University. I did, if you've seen in the news about the Marion Berry baseball team is not playing at their facilities. I did reach out to their vice president of finance and asked them a few questions, and they did respond to me. I just gonna go through a couple points that I think will be helpful just to share. The university is planning to move forward with adding artificial turf to the baseball field this fall tentatively, so that is still planned. They basically phased the project. The lighting has been installed and some facility improvements have been made at their baseball field, but then the artificial turf is gonna happen this fall. So that's still the plan. Once those upgrades are completed, it's also the university's plan to offer opportunities for the school district and others to utilize that field. And then in 2026, they're planning to make improvements to their softball field. And then similarly, they will offer that improved facility to the school district and other community groups to use. They did indicate that they were negotiating a long-term lease with Salem Baseball, but deep into those negotiations, they learned that the Salem Baseball Club did not have the promised financial resources for the improvements. So again, backing up, that was a component of their funding for these improvements. It was a mix. The university had money, there were state funds allocated, and then this private funding from Salem Baseball Club, which is essentially Marion Berry's. That latter one did not materialize, as what I've heard, and so that is one of the reasons why I think that they've had to delay. Well, that they are still fundraising for some of the money needed for the improvements, the conversion to artificial turf. That's what I have on that one.
And they are planning on being at Chemeketa this.
They are. If you see in the news, they plan to be on Chemeketa this year.
The Marion Berries.
Yeah.
And we just wanted to make sure all of you had that update. So Rob, thanks for doing that, just because that was involved a number of discussions among this board and public comment for this board a while back. And so we thought it was useful to make sure you were all updated on kind of the status of that project. So thanks, Rob, for digging into that a bit more.
Yeah, I also just want to quickly highlight that there is no graffiti and vandalism report. We're revamping that and we're still in the process of doing that. So that will be returning to your agenda as a written report in the future. We're just working on that on our side. And then I'm actually going to just do one more thing. There was an email about the open houses the city is holding for stakeholders about improvements to Peace Plaza. There was an open house on June 3rd that I attended, and it was well attended. The project team shared a concept for what they could accomplish in terms of improving Peace Plaza. There are some limitations on the amount of resources available to do everything we want to do at once. So it's going to be a phased approach. But I do want to encourage the board to come to 2 additional open houses that are going to be occurring later in the summer. One, there's not specific dates yet, but one will be in September. One will be in November, and when those are actually scheduled, we'll share that information with you. If you have interest in this and you want to see the materials that were presented, just reach out to me and I'll share the display boards with you. I have them. And I can kind of get you up to speed on what's being proposed there. And that's all I had.
Great, thanks, Rob. Any other questions or comments about the information reports?
I would like just make the observation that we spent quite a bit of time in thinking about and hearing about the parking lot improvements at Minto Brown Island Dog Park. They have been done and they have been done very, very well. It's very well received, it's being used well, and it's just a really nice improvement. Kudos. Thanks.
Thank you, Al, for pointing that out. I agree. I was out there several weeks ago for the first time since it was completed, and I was pretty amazed and pretty pleased with how it all came together. So thanks to the team for doing that.
My car is very happy about it.
The new business, and I believe we have one item in new business to bring forward that Rob has. And so we'll have Rob do that, and then if there's any other new business, we can address that. Rob?
Yeah, I'm going to see, nope, wrong screen. Hold on, let me reshare that. If some of you have been on the board long enough that you may recall what I'm about to bring up, but the city in I think it was 2022 initiated a process to propose some revisions to chapter 51 of Salem Revised Code, which is the event sound permit chapter. And that process, well, in a nutshell, was put on hold for a while. And now it is coming back. Public Works is doing outreach currently about these proposed code changes. And it does have a interface with parks as it relates to permitted events in parks and the sounds that and the noise they generate, essentially. I'm gonna use the word sound, not noise, actually, for this discussion. But for those in the room, I passed out just a one sheet about what's kind of summarizing the code amendments. These are substantially the same proposal that was shared with the board in 2022. However, the members have changed. So the question that I would like some feedback on is, would the board like Public Works to come and just give a presentation about this at your next meeting and go into a little more depth about the code amendments? And then obviously have an opportunity for the members to ask questions and provide comments. If that's of interest, we can definitely schedule that for your July meeting.
And Rob, just for clarity's sake, as folks are looking through that, I believe what that sheet identifies is that there's a portion of these permits or requirements around these permits specific to when the events are held in city parks versus when not. Is that correct? Which is kind of the particular nexus that we may have here.
Just this summary table here that talks about the type of permit. You see the first question, is it in a city park? And so obviously that dictates to a great extent what type of permit. So obviously whether it's in a city park or not is a huge part of the permit review process. So then I'm not an expert in this. I haven't been watching it, but we could definitely get that person in. It's Robert Chandler, who's the Assistant Public Works Director. He's the one leading this. And so he's available to attend your July meeting and would be happy to come if you wanted to a presentation.
Anybody have any thoughts about that?
How busy is our agenda next month?
The quick answer to that is we could probably fit it in.
We'll know that answer in 3 weeks, Rick.
Has there been much contention over this? I haven't heard of any problems about it.
I have also not heard any feedback, but I also haven't been particularly involved. Just in the handout, I know there's some outreach going on to other groups. And I don't know if Dr. Chandler has gotten feedback from those groups or not, or what type of feedback he's received.
I remember a discussion about it, a few years back, but I don't remember anything more than there was a discussion about it a couple of years ago.
Would this be applicable to concerts at the state fairgrounds?
That'd be a great question for Dr. Chandler, I don't know, if it would, I don't know. I don't know if you, no.
Yeah, that's the only event venue that I've heard issues about sound objections. And so if it doesn't apply to that, I'm not too concerned, but if it would apply to that and have relevance to it, I think it might be interesting to know.
Well, and I guess my thought on that, Al, is even if it applies to that, that's outside of our purview because that's not a park.
That's not a park issue.
That's a state park, yeah. It's not our parks.
Yeah.
I think the focus of the presentation will only be on like the state park.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
So
City
I-
parks specifically, and where I recall that things have been brought forward to us before is Sound and Riverfront.
Yeah.
But I think that specifically being people who didn't have permits, and were just making loud sound, for their unpermitted events. So I guess my initial thought is there is a park nexus here. If our July agenda is not looking too booked, I think it could be worthwhile for us to kind of hear the presentation, but Alan, I'll turn it over to you.
You touched on what I was going to talk about. We had a fair number of complaints from people who, now that we've got downtown residences, were complaining about what was going on. And you're right, a lot of them were unpermitted because during COVID they issued no permits. So but because we're involved with parks, as we go forward, if we have a better understanding on how this program plays out, we can better deal with the complaints when they come in, or else who to direct them to. So if we can accommodate it, I think it'd be wise. Plus, it sort of gets us reconnected with Public Works. After the fiasco with the trees, we had a chilling period there for a while.
I think the tree discussion will be later this year. That might be coming back forward too, but okay, I think with no particular objections, my thought, Rob, is let's see if Dr. Chandler is available for July, and if we can reserve 20 minutes of that agenda for an overview here, particularly around the parks related nexus and what the changes there might be and what the impacts might be to some of the events, the known events that we have going on in our parks each year. Any other new business? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Rick, seconded by Alan. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? All right. I will call this meeting adjourned. Thank you all for your participation and discussion today. Sorry I could not be there in person with you all yet again.
Keith, I'd love to see you here sometime.
I will make it back into that room at some point. The last few months have proven challenging.